Hello. So, Democrats lost the election, and a lot of them are wondering what to do now. So, let's talk a little bit about what the response to the election should be like. Um, it's important to note some people are feeling really distraught, really distressed, and I'm not going to argue for no good reason, right? I've noticed amongst many conservatives I know, their argument has been as of late, well, maybe it's not going to be that bad. Maybe these things that you're worried about happening aren't going to happen. Let's give it a chance. It's important to note, though, that the people who are having the experience of feeling really concerned, right, that's their experience. And whilst you may not agree with that experience, it's important to note that simply dismissing it isn't going to do any good. But more importantly, let me speak to the people who really are very concerned. I happen to be one of them. So, when Donald Trump was first elected, um, uh, 8 years ago, right? Um, my thought process had been, well, this isn't necessarily the direction that I would have gone, but I don't want to root against the guy flying the plane. And I started doing a show. And in that show, the first episode that I did was about compromise and trying to work together and trying to see commonalities. And I do see some people still kind of trying to push that particular way of thinking. And I don't necessarily think that that is wrong. That being said, there's a lot that's happened this time around that makes me think that whilst I greatly value compromise and having conversation, right, and trying to recognize the humanity in others, that there are definitely lines that you want to draw insofar as this something is not okay and this something we are not going to compromise. In this show, what I want to do really hopefully is mostly get to spend time kind of talking about analysis of like films and videos and comics, and we can apply those to our society and politics and things like that too. But I want to start from the position of recognizing that we need to speak. My position used to be let me really just not let people know where I'm coming from directly. Let them take the information and kind of do what they think is best with it, because it's not my position to try and influence people. And I still think that in many, many circumstances, it is not my position to try and influence people. It is, however, my position, and I think all of our positions, to use our voice and to speak, because there's people who are unheard and now are in tremendous danger. So one thing we can always do is ask ourselves, well, who can and can't vote, at least as a basic start for who's kind of most vulnerable in our society. And that ends up being groups like refugees, the homeless, children, and then also groups of people who their group is so small that they don't really have much voice. So, for instance, the trans population, right? Many conservative politicians have kind of realized, well, you can punch down against the trans population all you want. You can say as many horrific things as you want about them. And keep in mind, like, whatever your kind of moral or religious stance is fundamentally different from how you act it, how you live it, how you talk about people, and how you treat people. So, our politicians have a great deal of comfortability talking about the trans population in really heinous and nasty ways. Why? Well, if they lose some trans people's votes, it doesn't really impact them. Speak up, and not just in the town square, not just in the voting booth, but engage in movements and letter writing and protests. Yes, do all of those things, because the fact of the matter is even if in this we are a minority voice can be incredibly powerful, right? During the civil rights movement, it's not like the white community, for the most part, was advocating for civil rights for the black community. And even amongst the black community, it wasn't a majority of black people who were getting involved in it. But they made a difference. Those that did made a difference, a significant and important difference. If anything, the whole MAGA movement is a great example of the fact that you can start kind of as a minority, and if you scream loud enough, people will start thinking, oh, maybe what they're saying is important. So speak up and speak loudly. And unfortunately, there's a strong tendency for the people to think that loud voices are the most passionate and the ones closest to the truth. So speak and do it everywhere, even if it's uncomfortable. Why? Because people should be aware of the fact that the ways that they're voting and the choices that they're making are affecting you and affecting other people. that now, because of their choices, you're scared, or that you've lost rights, or you're worried about this other group of people. Heaven forbid that in your concerns that you're not just worried about yourself, that you're worried about others who maybe can't even vote or voted but were ignored. There should be no shame in voting with awareness that other people matter too, and that you aren't the only person who's impacted by your vote. So speak. And if only, even if you're like, well, what difference does it make? When I'm someone who feels like he doesn't have a voice, knowing that other people are speaking about my circumstance makes a difference. So all of those people out there, all of those vulnerable people who don't have a voice right now, or who are terrified right now, who really their vote isn't counted or doesn't matter or they can't vote. When you speak, you're voicing for them and you're reminding the world that they matter regardless of their wealth or access to votes. My position here from this point henceforth is that Democrats, liberals, conservatives who believe that these people matter need to speak. And so to that end, I think step number one in addressing kind of this, for many people, very scary circumstance is speaking, not being silenced, right? Not being silent. The other thing to do is make a movement, which is in line with speaking, right? Make a pro movement, a movement that is positive. Even movements, the political spin operations have gotten so good that even when your movement isn't an attempt to say something negative or to take something away from people, they'll find a way to spin it that way. Black Lives Matter is a great example of that. People come out saying, yes, Black Lives Matter, and all of a sudden people are going, so you're saying white lives don't? No, that wasn't like, I need to add two at the end of it? Black Lives Matter too? Like, what do I need to do to make that clear? But the fact of the matter is they're going to spin it to try and make it sound like you're trying to take something away. And so the clearer and simpler it is, the better, right? Pro-democracy, pro-freedom, pro-liberty, right? That what we're advocating for is freedom. Moving forward with that can at the very least make us feel like we're doing something and that we're not alone in the things that we care about. And that's, I think, speaks to another really important point, which is to stop attacking each other. This is certainly happening a lot in the left right now, right, amongst Democrats, in terms of who do we blame? Who do we blame for this? Well, unfortunately, sometimes things just go this way, right? That's the nature of republics and the nature of governments and societies and the nature of the universe, right? Entropy, chaos is a thing. And it is a constant battle to try and maintain high energy social circumstances that take a lot of work, right? And democracy is one of them. The natural state of the universe is not a democratic one. So you have to constantly work to maintain it. And so you can take steps back. You could fall backward. It's happened in the United States before. If there's this idea that, oh, well, the United States has always been moving without stumble towards greater equality and equity, that's historically not the case. There are times where we have moved forward, say shortly after the Civil War, and then moved pretty far back 20 years after the Civil War, right? So then it took a long time. It took, 50 some odd years, 60, 70 some odd years to finally end segregation. But it wasn't just incrementally getting better, right? Civil War ends, voting rights for the Black community, things start getting better. You have Black people appearing in public office, and then boom, it tanks with segregation, Jim Crow laws. So things can get worse before they get better. So we can't tell ourselves like, oh, well, this is the first time that kind of thing has happened. It hasn't, and people have had to fight, and it may not end within my lifetime. That's a tragic fact, but that's not a reason for me to give up. So within that idea of not attacking each other, working together to find these common values and these things that we believe are important in order to try and make the world a better place, includes not abandoning the people who currently have less political clout. The idea of like, well, maybe we should ban the trans population. And that perspective tends to walk hand in hand with the idea of common sense. Well, maybe what the American populace is telling us is that liberals aren't being engaging in common sense. This is false, right? Common sense is really just another way of saying common belief. And if our common belief in the United States is that trans people aren't really people, or that we actually know what their gendering is, or what kinds of bathrooms that they should actually use, that's just a common belief. That in the same way that the United States commonly held that slavery was okay in lots of places, that what didn't make it common sense. The idea that women were inferior and that they couldn't be trusted to vote, and that when they tried to vote it would just make everything crazy, right? That was common sense back before 1920. And what we really mean by that, it was just the common belief. Common sense is just whatever you were kind of raised around in your society at the time that you come to believe happens to be the case in the way that things should be. So this push right now, like, to, okay, well, let's go ahead and start offloading these groups of people, that is fundamentally an anathema to the notion of liberalism, which is based and grounded in the idea of liberty, of greater liberties, the idea that each person has these fundamental rights and that those rights should be protected and respected. And for Democrats to have any moral authority, to not just be another party arguing about economy, because apparently that's the only thing that anyone cares about. And again, I don't mean to say that it isn't important. It is important, but none of us get to live forever. So sometimes more important than economy is morality. If I'm willing to do whatever it takes just so that I can eke out a couple more years of my life, or even so that my children can, and I'm willing to treat people horribly in order to do that, and murder and cause distress, and just, then what is it that we're preserving that's so worthwhile? It is not just preservation that matters. It is also what it is that you're trying to save. If humanity is supposed to roll on and roll on, and it's so important that we as a society continue, or I as an individual continue, or that my family continues, isn't it important that what it is that's continuing is actually a good thing? Survival alone is insufficient. So, whilst we're engaging in this autopsy of the Democratic Party, we should really be asking ourselves questions about whether or not, in attempting to win elections, whether or not we're abandoning the people who need us the most. So, those are my things. Voice, speak everywhere, right? Don't be silent. A movement, a pro-movement, a movement of support, right? Not attacking each other, supporting each other through this, and not abandoning the people who need us the most. The grounding of our moral authority as people who say that we care. And finally, I do want to say one last thing about this. Avoid becoming that which we claim to be against. There's something to be said for making monsters of other people. I'm not saying that the choices that people make are okay, or that I agree with them. Quite the contrary. I'm saying speak up and do something about them. But making monsters is something that I would rather leave to the MAGA movement. Let them make monsters. It reveals who they are and how they think, and the depths that they're willing to descend to get the things that they want for themselves. Whether it's compassionate conservatives or liberals, or people in the MAGA movement who go, you know what, I don't like that. We should not ever find ourselves in a position where we become the thing that we say, that we claim we're against. And speaking to people who are in the MAGA movement, if your point has been liberals have been unfair and they're taking away my rights and they're full of hate, and look at what I see on Twitter about MAGA, why would you become that? Then we're just all monsters at that point. And what's left worth saving of the country? So thank you for taking the time to listen. I look forward to our next conversation. If you enjoyed this, please like, please subscribe. If you agree or disagree, please comment. I love to hear your comments. So thank you so much. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.